Like many things that go horribly wrong, it started with a blowjob. Yes, oral sex allegedly 10 years ago, a female developer, she put together a real shitty game and she wanted a good review. So she offered oral sex to a game reviewer to give her a good review. Because this was years ago, 2014. There were still game magazines. And to get a good review was, it could make or break you as a developer. If you got a great review, you would have a lot of sales. And it looks like she got a good review in exchange for her services. This information broke and it became known as Gamergate. I just happen to remember this because Ethan Ralph was doing a 10th anniversary of Gamergate. I'm like, wow, has it already been 10 years? That's an incident a lot of people aren't aware of, especially if you're older. But young people understand it, especially young men, because so many young men loved their gaming community. That's what they live for. Feminists, they got in everything else in life, in the movies, on television, everything. This is one hobby young, mostly white and Asian men could do without being lectured in. So they loved it and they played their games. And then this happened and it created an event that I don't think people could have prepared for at the time. They didn't see where this would lead. Because on the surface, it's just a question about journalism and integrity. Obviously, if you're a serious journalist, you shouldn't base your reviews on getting sex from, a woman, obviously. But it expanded into something a lot bigger than that. It's sort of like World War I when the Archduke was assassinated. It ended up with millions of people killed. But that wasn't the reason millions of people were killed. That was just what set it off. And Gamergate really set off a cultural war that I would argue we're still in the middle of. Even though Gamergate itself, it was won by the bad guys. So if you're doing this like a battle, you have one side were the nerdy white and Asian boys, and the other side, the big corporate media, the corporate game developers, and they clashed. And I have to give it, the young, nerdy, teenage white boys, they put a fear in these people. They organized. I think this is one of the first times I ever saw. Now we see it all the time. But back in 2014, this was still kind of new on the internet where people would organize. And this is the first time I think gamers saw themselves as like a community. And they started a resistance and they started to fight back against what they saw corruption in gaming. And it had never been done before like this, where it's like a leaderless resistance. There wasn't a single leader. Oh, there was people that were kind of famous that kind of spearheaded the effort and brought the issues forward, but it wasn't one guy. And the corporate media and the corporate establishment had a hard time containing it. And of course, their immediate reaction was to play the victim. Oh, these white boys and Asian boys. Oh, they just hate women. Oh, that's the real reason. Misogyny in gaming. So that was their takeaway. So it quickly became greater than should you trade sex for a good game review into something a lot bigger, meaning should white boys and Asian boys basically be able to have their space without propaganda? And the answer was no, we can't tolerate this. So there was a huge clash that happened. And a lot of what you see now with like the trolling and all that type of stuff really came out of Gamergate. And in 2014, so this energy, a lot of these guys, they weren't necessarily political, but it really red pilled them on the nature of a lot of women and feminism and the establishment. And they became, a lot of these people, very right-wing, and a lot of them got into the alt-right. There was a big overlap between libertarians and then what was called the alt-right. They wanted to fight against the regime. And then that kind of morphed into support for Donald Trump because he represented an outsider. There was a lot of energy because of that was really kicked off by the whole Gamergate experience. And obviously, the establishment didn't take this well. The lessons they took is we got to break the gaming community. We got to make it so it's not a bunch of white males or Asian males that are playing it, even if they're the ones playing it, we're got to change the game. So they hired a lot of these women, made them very rich to basically take out everything masculine out of the games, demasculized the games. They made them very feminized. So no, you can't have hot women in games anymore. That perpetuates a stereotype. And you had, these fat women in games, and we had to get more representation, and we got to censor what you say in games. You guys really have naughty language you're using in games. Oh, we can't tolerate that. This objectifies women, and all these little women, they don't want to hear this language. And so you had a lot of censorship in the games. And the corporate world, how they responded is, oh my God, we need to censor the internet. Because before 2014, censorship was still kind of unheard of, really, on the internet. That was one of the great things about the internet. Say what you want. If you don't like what someone's saying, just don't watch their material. When I first started on YouTube, when I first started to hear of censorship, I really couldn't believe it. It seemed really anti-American. And more importantly, it seemed like anti the spirit of the internet. The internet was put whatever you want out there. And if you don't like it, then just don't consume the content. But this is the corporate world, and the big organizations like the ADL, SPLC, and others. They thought, oh my God, we've lost the gatekeeping function here. We have all these people that are rising up. We can't squash them down because we have no control over this. We got to reinstitute the gatekeepers. So ever since Gamergate, the corporate world, the regime has responded by trying to tap down on any unapproved discussion on the internet or ideas that they think are naughty. And then it wasn't very long after Gamergate that we got the heavy-handed censorship in YouTube, on Twitter, Facebook. Before then, there really wasn't much censorship. And part of this was to try to, it scared them, all these people rising up against what they were trying to push out. So that's kind of where we are now. Now, if you look at this as a war, the bad guys won. The corporate entities, the feminists, they pretty much won. The official gaming companies now are all woke. You have a lot of women, not some women, because there's a lot of transgenders in there now. And every game now, at least the mainstream game, all these, heavy, obese women of color lecturing you about your white privilege, something that gamers don't want to see. But this is what they've been pushing. So they won on that. And you've seen on the internet now how they're doing everything they can to censor the internet. Sometimes people pop up like Elon Musk that makes it hard for them, or that Telegram guy. But there's been a worldwide effort to try to re-implement the gatekeepers because they don't want normal people to do what the Gamergate people did, which was like a virtual uprising that they didn't plan on. It really scared them. And I think that's an emotion we don't understand. We look at the enemy, the regime, as being big and scary. They have all the billions of dollars and power. But really, in many ways, they're very fearful. They really have a fear of losing control. They're very uneasy in their current situation because they fear that something like this could happen again in the future. Is still under the surface. This never really went away. And if America should ever splinter, or Europe, the same phenomenon that created Gamergate could rise again, where people now organizing are not organizing because they want good game reviews, not based on a woman giving sex to get a good game review. It's something bigger than that. They want their societies, they want their homelands, and this really scares them. And this is what they don't want because it kind of represents a model of leaderless resistance. So it's hard to put your handle on who to strike down. There's one guy leading it. It's easy. You either buy the guy off or you kill him and imprison him. But if there's all these people and you really don't know who's running it and it's decentralized, it's very difficult and it really much scares them. And I think it's a very effective model for resistance in the future. So if nothing else, while Gamergate itself, I guess you could say failed, obviously. They didn't protect their space. The white boys and Asian boys didn't protect their gaming space. It's been overrun. There's censors. They can't speak freely in their games now. They can't say naughty words. And the whole internet's now being censored. But for a brief moment, these young and nerdy and geeky guys put the fear in God into the establishment. And I think we should always respect that. And they actually gave a model of something that could be bigger in the future of how to rebel against the system. And as the system's not getting more powerful. In many ways, it's getting weaker because of DEI. There's a lot of incompetence. And when more and more people get involved, I think we can have a hope of breaking the tyranny that's above us. So what started out as, hey, I'll suck your dick if you give me a good review, has turned into a huge cultural battle that is still not over yet. Talk to you guys later.